I want to start our time together with somewhat of a confession. You know, guys, I like to share my pet peeves. I'm not perfect, but one of the things that I struggle with, I have a pet peeve for people who park their cars incorrectly. Okay, all right. I don't know if that's anybody else, because I'm sure none of you are bothered by pulling into a parking lot only to find someone parked on the line or so close to the line that you can't even pull into that parking spot. Maybe part of the problem, I drive a Ford Expedition, so maybe I drive a vehicle that's not made for everyone's parking skill set. But let me be the one to tell you, I for whatever reason, I struggle. Because, you know, my thing is, all you got to do is back up and try it again. That's all. Just try it again. My wife and I, we have a thing because I feel like my wife doesn't see the lines in the parking lot. I think she just like, these are not here for guidance, they're here for decoration. I said, babe, where are we going? What's happening here? That's a personal pet peeve of mine. It actually reminds me of a story of a young man who was running late to work one February morning specifically, and the story says that he gets to his office parking lot and he is upset because as he's trying to find a parking spot, he notices that it appears to be that everybody parked poorly that morning. Everybody parked over the line, so close to the line. Some people took up 2 parking spots completely, and he is now becoming later and later because he can't find somewhere to park. He actually starts thinking, how ridiculous are these people? Matter of fact, he actually thinks that it's a practical joke played on him. He walks into work angry, upset, and late. The story says that he's talking with one of his friends, and he says, man, how ridiculous are our coworkers? They're just so inconsiderate, so rude, so selfish. They would park any old kind of way coming into work this morning. And his coworker said, well, maybe it was the snow. He said, the snow? He said, yeah, before you got here, there was a light coating of snow all over the parking lot, and people could not see the lines. He felt very bad in the moment because he said, man, I was angry. I thought less of these people, but here it is. I didn't have all of the information. And today I want to talk about this idea that sometimes some of our conflicts come when we jump to conclusions. Okay, this is going to be as practical of a sermon series as I've ever preached, okay? But our main idea is this, that we want to jump to clarity before we jump to conclusions. Okay, I just need someone to say amen, because you've been in a situation where either someone didn't get clarity, or you can say, I didn't get clarity, I jumped to conclusions. And I actually believe that when if we're going to start handling conflicts in a biblical way, we're going to start handling conflicts with the heart and the idea to represent Christ in everything that we do, to represent kingdom characteristics or kingdom principles. We have to learn to jump to clarity before we jump to conclusions. Now, let's be honest. If we could, just by show of hands, you can say, hey, I've jumped to conclusions before. Just, okay, all right, amen. So a few of us. How many of you all, let's be honest, you actually kind of like jumping to conclusions just a little bit? Okay, you're not gonna be honest with me? Okay, all right, it's okay. I really feel like we like jumping to conclusions because jumping to conclusions makes us feel like we are what? Right. Unfortunately, though, when we jump to conclusions before we get to clarity, it causes some type of conflict. And I actually believe that there is a very common verse in Deuteronomy chapter number 5, verse 20, that I think really helps us address this idea. Yeah, I'm going to the Ten Commandments. If you don't know what's going on in Deuteronomy chapter number 5, it's not exactly a popular book. But let's go to Deuteronomy chapter number 5, verse 20. Short verse, I want to read it to you. It says, "And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. How many of y'all have heard this before? Should not bear false witness? Okay. You heard 10 commandments. Here is the 9th of the 10 commandments here given to the children of Israel by way of God through Moses. And in this 9th commandment, as God is trying to help the children of Israel understand what it looks like to live out the 2 greatest commandments, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to also love your neighbor as yourself. This 9th commandment, as we see that the 10 commandments are often broken up into 2 parts, how to love God and what it looks like to love others. In this 9th commandment, we see where this common idea of not bearing false witness, or sometimes we interpret it as not lying on your neighbor. That's how I remembered it growing up. Don't tell a lie on your neighbor. This idea that this is even in the commandments actually brings up a concern for me. It actually brings up a question of why was this so important to address in the 10 foundational commandments that God would give Moses to the children of Israel. This would actually help us to understand why we are even talking about conflict in the first place. I would suggest that one of the reasons why we need to discuss conflict, especially within the family, especially within the church, is because, number one, conflicts can make living out the great commandment challenging. When you have conflicts with others, it can make it challenging to love others. Can somebody say amen? Just sometimes. And sometimes we need to address those challenges so we can live out the great commandment. Secondly, if reconciliation is the ministry of the church, not just reconciliation to God, but reconciliation to one another, we have to deal with the conflicts that create barriers to our reconciliation. All right. One of the things we say here at Vertical Church, that healthy reconciliation will always have humble confrontation. I know there are some of you that are non-confrontational, but the reality is that in order for us to have true unity and reconciliation, we're going to have some confrontation. But I stress that it must be humble. Thirdly, we have to realize that where there are differences, division has potential. Say it again. Where there are differences, division has potential. Here at Vertical Church, we don't want to create a church where everyone is the same. We believe that we are not called to sameness, we are called to oneness. And because we are called to oneness, it allows for us to have our differences. But always remember, wherever there are differences, division has potential. So we must address within the context of our differences how we can still be unified, and we must address our conflicts. We must address our challenges to maintain unity. This is why we must address this. This is one of the issues that the people of God have to address. One of the issues we'll find out later that we have to address in the early church. The reality is we're going to have conflicts without question. The issue we must address over the next 4 weeks is, do we have the emotional maturity and the spiritual maturity to be resolved to see resolution in the midst of our conflicts? The strength of a relationship is not determined by your ability to be for each other in your agreements, but by your ability to be for each other, even in the midst of your disagreements. It's not a matter of what we all agree on. Can we still be for each other? Can we still love each other? Can we still work hand in hand together? Can we forgive one another when the conflicts come? And it takes emotional maturity and it takes spiritual maturity. When we look at this commandment to not bear false witness, we most often think of the idea of thou shalt not lie. But I want to tell you today that this verse is much more than lying on someone. I want to work through this today. The context, of course, for this commandment is a legal context, of course. It says, do not give some type of false testimony about another person that may harm them legally. When you start digging into the meaning of this particular commandment, do not give a false testimony about another person that may harm them legally. But it's even more than that. One theologian noted that I should never give false testimony against anyone, twist no one's words, not gossip or slander, nor join in condemning anyone rashly or without a hearing. Rather, in court and everywhere else, I should avoid lying and deceit of every kind. These are the very devices that the devil uses, and they would call down on me God's intense wrath. I should love the truth, speak it candidly, and openly acknowledge it. And I should do what I can to guard and advance my neighbor's good name. I know you're saying, well, Pastor, where are we going with this idea of not jumping to conclusions, jumping to clarity, and we're still talking about the ninth commandment, not bearing false witness. I believe a part of what this commandment is saying is that before we bear false witness or give a false account of someone, we have to first make sure we don't have a false account of them ourselves. Say it again. In other words, when it comes to conflict, seek clarity and truth before you draw your conclusions. Okay. What if the first place that you were to bear false witness with people is not with others, but with yourself? What if the first place that we misrepresent people is not with others, but with self? What if the very first place we mischaracterize someone's intentions, their words, and their actions is not with someone else, but it's with our assessment of them? Here's what I'm saying, that I believe that if we're going to have a biblical plan for conflict resolution, we have to start with how we evaluate and assess people. And sometimes, I can be honest, I am much quicker to jump to conclusions than I am to clarity. And the first place I should protect people from bearing false witness about them, their character, what they say, and what they do is with me. Okay. Because oftentimes the person we talk to the most about our conflicts is who? Ourselves. Okay, all right. Let's be clear here. If you've ever had any argument or any confrontation, you've had the argument with yourself first. Okay. You've been riding down the road and you've prepared. If they say this, oh, I'm ready for that. Before you say it to anybody else, can you believe they had the nerve? You're doing this with who first? Yourself. And one of the things I want to make sure that we do is it's not just that we have a misrepresentation when we are towards others, but it first has to start with an intention and an intentionality to say, listen, I want to be clear about my representation of you, your thoughts, your actions with me. Here's the thing. Jumping to conclusions is easy. Watch this. Because you can jump to conclusions in isolation. Jumping to conclusions does not demand a great deal amount of conversation. Jumping to conclusions does not demand humility. Jumping to conclusions does not demand conversation. Jumping to conclusions does not demand you put yourself in a position for someone to say, you misunderstood me. I want us to jump to clarity before we jump to conclusions. We want to prevent the misrepresentation of someone, not just to others, but also to ourselves. It is easy to believe the worst about someone, watch this, when that person has hurt you, knowingly or unknowingly. It's easy to believe that, whether they meant to do it or not. Here's the reality. We've done it to someone else, watch this, and someone's also done it to us. I was talking to a pastor recently, and he was trying to tell me, I was coaching him, and he was like, Pastor Ryan, you're so great, I said, listen, let me help you understand something. I am the villain in somebody's story. No matter how good you think you are, no matter how many T's you think you cross and I's you dot, I promise you, you have the potential to be the villain in someone's story. Even if they misunderstand something you've said or done. Are y'all following me? So a couple of things I think we need to do when we're laying down this foundation to make sure we jump to clarity and not conclusions is that, number one, the first thing we got to do is we got to say this: I need clarity. Ask yourself the question, did I miss something? I need clarity. Did I miss something? Because this commandment of not bearing false witness is so much more than just not lying on people. It's living in the way of love, so much so that you want to know the truth. You want to make sure you define a person's moment by what is true, not just by what you perceive. I'm going to explain this a little bit more. So number one, I need clarity. Did I miss something? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter number 19. We see more in the law about this idea of bearing false witness. Deuteronomy chapter number 19, verse 15 through 18. It says this: a single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime or for any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. Only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. If a malicious witness arises to accuse a person of wrongdoing, then both parties to the dispute shall appear before the Lord, before the priest and the judges who are in office in those days. The judges shall inquire diligently, and if the witness is a false witness and has accused his brother falsely. So here we're seeing something that's interesting, that in the law, it's now not only saying, hey, listen, don't bear false witness, but it's saying, listen, one person's eyewitness view is not sufficient for an accusation. It's not sufficient for a charge. So the question is, well, why is that the case? Because we all have the potential to miss something. So the text says, listen, we need 3 people to confirm this accusation. And I want us to see this, because I think sometimes we don't walk in humility to even admit, I may have missed something. I may have overlooked something. I may have heard one thing, and that's all I heard and processed, and I missed something else. Okay, I'll talk about me, because y'all like it's never happened to you. I know from my wife and I, April, when we first got married, I am the type of person, whenever there's conflict, I want to talk about it right now. In the moment. Here is the issue. Let's address it today. Let's move forward. And I remember one of the things my wife had to teach me is that my tone mattered more than my actual words. April, don't you do it. My tone actually mattered more than what I was saying. Fred, I'm not going to do it. I heard what I said. She heard how I said it. Y'all, I'm just putting myself out there. I hadn't figured this thing all the way out. Lord, I'm working on it. I'm confused because I know what I said. I know what I said because I heard myself say it. But the response I'm getting is telling me you didn't hear what I said. And she would soon tell me, I don't care what you said. I don't like how you said it. And what I heard when she said, I didn't like how you said it was, you didn't like what I said. So now I'm frustrated. Because here it is, I didn't hear what she was saying. I heard what I wanted to hear. All I needed was a reason not to continue this conversation because you didn't hear or like what I actually said. When what she actually said was she didn't like how I said it. Here's what I'm saying. That we have the potential to miss something in communication. We have the potential to not get everything that we see. We have the potential to misread the moment. And so because of that, we have to be willing to ask the question, did I miss something? I need clarity. Okay. Did I miss something? I need clarity. When you're dealing with conflict, especially with community, especially with family, clarity is key. The truth of the matter is that we always don't get clarity. We don't always give in clarity. Yeah. We don't always receive clearly, and we don't always communicate clearly. Are y'all with me? And because of that, because you care about the people around you, because you love them, because you want to love them well, you want to give yourself the opportunity to get clarity. I recently found out that eyewitness testimony in the court of law is statistically known to be often incorrect. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but the Innocence Project, which focuses on using DNA evidence to exonerate the innocent, reports that 73% of convictions overturned on the basis of DNA were cases where the defendant was originally found guilty on the basis of eyewitness testimony. What am I saying? Science proves that we all have the ability to miss it. Let's try an exercise. I know some of you, I can feel you saying, not me, Pastor. I don't miss it. I get it right every time. I'm going to show you a video on the screen, all right? Hold on that for a second, Lo. I'm going to show you a video on the screen. Kurt, you can go ahead and bring the house lights down so we'll make sure they don't have anything to miss it. I'm going to show you a video on the screen. And what I want you to do, there are two teams. One team is wearing white, one team is wearing black. They have a basketball. What I want you to do is count how many times the white team passes the ball. We got it? I'm only going to play the video for you once because I have more sermon to preach, all right? All right, if you can run that video for me.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
All right, give me some lights. All right. Let me ask you this again. How many people can tell me how many passes the white team made? Anybody? What you got right there? 14. Okay, Mac, what you got? 15. Somebody else? 13. What you got? 13, Brand? All right, Maze. You got 12. Y'all always watching the same video. 16. Anybody else want to give? Come on, sweetheart. You got 11. You can give yours too, sir. 14. Did everybody first see the monkey? Okay, who didn't see the monkey walk through? Okay. Wow. You didn't see the monkey literally walk through the middle of the video? Wow. Hey, Lo, run this video again for the people that didn't see our monkey. You can run that video one more time? You can count again as well. All right. You didn't see it. Stood in the middle and walked. All right. Give me some lights, Kurt. Give me some lights. Okay, did everybody see the monkey this time? For the record, it was 15 passes. Mac, you were right, 15 passes. Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I want you to see. We all have the ability to miss it. Steve, you didn't even see the monkey. Here's what I'm saying. I want us to remember this, that even in the context of conflicts and challenges, you have the ability to miss something. Because sometimes, watch this, we can be so focused on something else. We could be focused on how something's being said versus what's being said, or vice versa. We could be focused on body language. We could be focused on so many different things and still have the ability to miss it. So we must say, okay, I need clarity. I need to ask the question, did I miss something? Matthew chapter number 18, verse 15 through 17, talks about this and the idea of us having conflict and what happens when someone sins against you. Verse 15 through 17 says this: if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you. Watch this, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. Here it is. There is more than one person. Like, again, I have the ability to miss it. How I perceive it, how you perceive it. We have that ability. So if we're gonna pursue biblical intentionality and resolving conflicts, pursue clarity. Ask yourself the question, did I miss something? Number 2, let's move quickly. Number 2. So number 1, I need clarity. Number 2, I need understanding. What did you mean? What did you mean? I believe much like a lack of clarity can make conflicts messy, so can misunderstanding make conflicts messy. We all too often struggle to believe what's right or what's wrong about a person, situation, their conversations, their actions when we misunderstand, misinterpret, or misread others. This has been a challenge because I think sometimes My thing is, I think I have good interpretation. I think I have good evaluation. But if you really love the people around you, if you really see them and value them, give yourself and them the opportunity to get clarity and to get understanding. Let me ask this question. Have you ever been frustrated, disappointed with someone or something, with something that they never actually said? Has anyone ever been frustrated, disappointed, or upset with something that you never actually said? It's happened to all of us. I've been on both sides of it. And what I've learned is that I need understanding. I have too many times misread situations, misread people's words and actions, because I have a perspective. I have a context, I have a background, I have a language, I have mannerisms, I have things that I come from that may seem comfortable and I understand, but maybe someone else doesn't. And so I think if we're gonna love people well, if we're gonna love our family, our spouse, our children, we have to make sure that we're seeking diligently for understanding. Yeah. I've made this mistake several times of assuming because I understood that somebody else understood. One of the worst things that I've said in the context of my marriage with my wife and our conflicts and conversations makes sense to me. I want you to hear the arrogance and the pride that can leak from a statement like that. I need understanding. One of the ways I say this in vertical, you've heard me say this before, but for the sake of this message in the context of what we're preaching today, when we jump to clarity, write this down if you can, when we jump to clarity before we jump to conclusion, we will seek to understand before we are understood. Most times in the context of conflicts, we come into the conversation, we come into the situation wanting to be understood before we understand. The Bible calls husbands to live in an understandable way with your wives. I don't know about any other husband here, but I am one, and Lord knows I don't always understand. Like seriously, y'all, I pray this prayer. Help me to understand. Why? Because out of my understanding, I can better serve my wife. Out of my understanding, I can better serve my children. Out of my understanding, I can better serve our church. Out of our understanding, I can better serve our neighbor. So what am I saying? It's not so much for us to just settle and say, well, we just got a different way of thinking about things. Let's just agree to disagree. No, let's do the hard work of getting to a place of understanding. Watch this. Because where you do not have understanding, you will not have unity. I don't necessarily have to agree, but I should do the work to understand. Yeah. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 18, verse 2 says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Oof. Please don't quote this text in your next argument. Please don't do that. What was that verse Pastor Ryan said? You're a fool. Don't do that. My dad told me it's not nice to call people that. But I'm going to read the Bible one more time for us. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Here's what one of the pastors I used to serve, he used to say it like this. He says, Ryan, whatever you stand under is what you will understand. You have to put yourself in a position to be under, to hear, to listen, to learn, to act like you don't know it all. If you're ever going to understand, whatever you stand under is what you will understand. Are y'all following me? If we're going to engage reconciliation with our brothers and sisters, we have to pursue unity. We have to seek the welfare of others. We have, the Bible says, live peaceably as best we can with others. And we have to be willing to understand. Okay. We have to genuinely pursue understanding. And I say this because I think sometimes in the heat of a moment, in the heat of conflict and challenge, sometimes we ask questions that we don't really want answers to. I believe that, especially in the context of conflict, 75% of questions are just statements in question form. You're not really asking a question, you're trying to make a statement with a question. You're not genuinely trying to understand. I want you to think about this when it comes to the idea of misrepresenting someone to yourself. Because misrepresenting someone to yourself will lead to a misrepresentation of them to someone else, which ultimately, if we're not careful, will lead to disunity. In an interview, a politician by the name of Ben Sass explains how the 9th commandment must be applied to all types of disagreement. He said, we should assume our neighbor means well and try to characterize their position accurately. As it turns out, really believing in the dignity of your neighbor and loving your neighbor means that you want to try to refine and shape their best argument. This idea to say, I want to do the hard work of understanding not just what you said, but also what you mean. So here is one of the things I think is really important, especially in the context of a social media age. I believe it's important that sometimes we shouldn't just take what somebody posts and not have conversation. Yeah. Because I think sometimes we see something, and especially with somebody we know, instead of reaching out to them and say, hey, I saw you posted this. This is what I perceived. Did you mean this? Instead, we just unfollow them. Instead, we just disconnect ourselves from them completely. No. Seek understanding. Do the work of understanding. What Senator Sass is saying is maybe I am misunderstanding the people I'm in conflict with. Let's try to communicate it again. Let's be clear that sometimes people mean exactly what they say, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they communicate and articulate poorly. How do we know this? Because I've done it. What I said is not what I meant. Because I value you, because I believe that you are made in the image of God, you have dignity, I will pursue understanding. We want to get understanding, especially in the context of conflict. We don't want to jump to conclusions. We want to jump to clarity. Lastly, right here, write this down if you can, number 3. If we're going to do this, we're going to jump to clarity before we jump to conclusions. You got to say this last one, I need humility. I think under all of these things that we've listed so far, it has to be shaped by humility. This is what I'm talking about when we say emotional maturity and spiritual maturity. I need humility. I could be wrong. At the core, oftentimes, of conflict that does not get resolved is because either one or two parties are not willing to be humble to pursue reconciliation, say, hey, I messed up. I'm wrong. I misread that. I miscommunicated that. I didn't say that in the right way. I didn't consider how you were feeling. I didn't consider my tone. I messed up because I could be wrong. Deuteronomy 5:20, and you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This insinuates that you know the truth, but you choose not to share it. I think on the flip side of that is to not be in pursuit of the truth. I don't want to just believe the one thing I heard you say. I don't want to just believe the first thing. Let me do the hard work of getting clarity and understanding. I want to pursue the truth. I want to know. Maybe you misspoke. Maybe you misread. Maybe I misunderstood. And I think one of the dangerous things that happen is that we don't do the work of letting go of the misrepresentation. Have you ever had someone that they only had to cross you one time, and you held on to the misrepresentation? And you didn't give them the grace to show you, well, that wasn't who I really am. Yes, I really did that, but that's not consistent with who I really am. You held on to the misrepresentation. Have you ever been upset with someone and they didn't even know it, and you tight, not giving them the opportunity to say, oh, I didn't know that's what I did. I'm sorry. It takes a level of spiritual maturity, emotional maturity to say, okay, hey, this is what happened. This is what went wrong. I could have got this wrong. Pride will give you credit and no one else credit. Pride will give you the benefit of the doubt and no one else the benefit of the doubt. Pride will celebrate your interpretation and not pursue truth and clarity and understanding. Philippians chapter number 4, Paul writes to the church in Philippi here, and he has to address an issue because there is disunity in the church. There is issue. There is two women who served along with Paul, and they are at odds with one another. And I want you to hear what Paul does and what Paul says and how he actually encourages the church. He says then, my dearly loved and longed for brothers and sisters, my joy and crown, in this manner stand firm in the Lord, dear friends. Verse 2 says, I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Yes, I also ask you, true partner, to help these women who have contended for the gospel at my side, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. We're closing here. I think sometimes we look at this context and we look at specifically verse number 4. We love to quote it, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. But I think we forget that sometimes this verse was shared in the context of conflict. Yeah. Euodia and Syntyche, these two women are at odds with one another. They were once unified in their co-working labor with Paul and Clement, contending for the gospel, and yet something has happened that has caused them to not agree with one another. And Paul encourages them, says, listen, you need to make sure that your reasonableness is shown, your graciousness is shown. What he's talking about here, Tony Evans actually calls this maintaining maintaining your ability to think for the larger good. This idea of maintaining your reasonableness is the disposition that seeks what is best for everyone, watch this, and not just yourself. Paul encourages us to say, listen, I know that you're having a conflict, but in the middle of this, I need you still to rejoice that the Lord is near. I need you to rejoice in what you do agree upon. I need you to rejoice in the beauty of the gospel. I need you to humble yourself, not make it about you, but remember that it's about something bigger than you. I want to pursue unity in the church. And sometimes that comes with me pursuing, sharing and showing my reasonableness, my graciousness. Listen to verse number 6. It says, don't worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your requests to God. I want y'all to see this. A lot of times we see this verse and we don't understand that the context of this verse is in the context of disunity. Verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your what? Hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Paul still talking to the community. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. Can I just stop here for a moment? When we're dealing in conflict, what we dwell on oftentimes is the conflict and not the good things that God is still doing. He says, if there is anything praiseworthy, put your mind on these things. It says, do what you have learned and received and heard from me and seen in me. Watch this. And the God of peace will be with you. It's not this peace that we're talking about here that is this calmness in your soul. What if that peace that we're talking about here is peace between you and your neighbor? The gospel creates peace between us and God. And the gospel creates peace between us and our neighbor. Here's my question. What are you dwelling on? I'm not saying ignore when you are hurt. I'm not saying ignore when you've been mistreated. I'm not saying ignore when there are conflicts and challenges. But what are you dwelling on? Humble yourself. See, I could have misunderstood this. I could have misread this. I could have misunderstood what I heard or saw. Let me do the hard work of pursuing this person, pursuing this situation, pursuing this instance, and let me do the work of reconciliation with my brother and sister in Christ, with my family member, with my neighbor. What I love about the gospel, what Jesus models to us, is that our sin is conflict. Our sin makes us enemies of God. God pursues us in an effort to reconcile us back to him. I pray, church, as we are trying to model biblical conflict resolution, that we pursue those that we have conflict with. We make sure we see them. We don't want to misrepresent them. We want to understand. We want clarity. And we're humble. Amen?